You don't need to watch Secret Lives of Mormon Wives to understand why this story matters, because what's happening now with season 2 is so much bigger than reality television. It's a mirror held up to a culture that's obsessed with women's pain as long as it's profitable.
Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other.
Look me in the eyes, you narcissist. Look at me.
Just as God in Christ also has forgiven you.
She needs help, she needs to go to therapy, and she needs to go be a mom.
Thought this would be a really interesting case study for us to break down today, whether you watch the show or not. A case study on reality television and the dangers and how far it's really going these days, and whether it's doing more harm than good.
Show me life, show me love.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Ashley BTV. I'm a former TV news reporter and Hollywood actress who takes you behind the headlines. If you like pop culture deep dives, entertainment news, breaking down what you're seeing all over the internet, kind of asking the question of why, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, join the Beekeepers, and help us reach our next goal of 10,000 subscribers. Without further ado, let's get into it. The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives season 2 just aired last week. I did a binge, I watched all of it, and then I rewatched a lot of it to really thoroughly take notes for you guys, because I was wondering, why does this show feel wrong to watch? And we're going to break this down, because I think a lot of people feel this way. They're just not saying it on all over the internet. They're interviewing the stars. They're giving recaps. They're making this seem like a fun, kitschy, dramatic show. I mean, it scored higher than the Kardashians, who are like the queens of reality television, right? But for some reason, this season felt different. It felt more dangerous. And I want to break down why, because it gets into a lot of trauma. And if you haven't seen this season, this will be an entire spoiler alert. But I think it goes so much further than this particular show. It goes into the dangers of reality television and how far that they're pushing it these days. So I think this is going to be interesting even if you don't watch the show. Really seems like more and more that these women's pain are repackaged into a plot. The trauma is served up on a platter as tension, and their hardship is being monetized. And I know you could say that is reality television, but this season took it so much further than that.
You're such a prude.
Okay, I know about your past.
What's my past?
Yes, I know about your
What's
past.
my past?
If you're asking,
Give it to me.
If you're asking to swing with us, it's a no.
So for those of you who don't watch the show, you might want to give it a watch. It's a reality show that's definitely filled with fun moments and drama. If you like reality television, it's exploring the lives of LDS young women in their 20s and their 30s that live in Utah, and basically their lives. Taylor Frankie Paul created a group called Mom Talk on TikTok, kind of exploded with showing behind the scenes of the Mormon culture, but mostly just like doing fun dances, kind of really breaking out from the typical Mormon culture norms. But essentially, this became a TV show because she came out on a live stream a few years ago saying that she wasn't cheating on her husband, she was soft swinging. And what does that even mean? Well, you could watch the show and find out. It's not like fully having sexual intercourse with other partners, it's doing other things. So this blew up. And this is why these girls ended up getting this show. And they're filming a show for Hulu. They don't know how well it's going to do. And it really takes off. Like season 1 really took off. And it was mostly because Taylor Frankie Paul is unabashedly herself. And she is definitely kind of the clumsy hero of it all, right? She's the lovable, messy, very unfiltered person that is very fun to watch because she's so unfiltered. You really feel like what you see is what you get. And because she broke this out and it, became a huge headline all over entertainment news, this is why they got their show. So then you're exploring all these cultures. A lot of the women have a lot of children. A lot of them are breaking out from the Mormon culture, but you're also seeing them battle with having to stay in the Mormon culture. And you saw a lot of that in season 1. It was like there was drama, but it wasn't taken to a crazy traumatic degree. And we really upped it a notch. Why does this feel so dark right now? So we're going to explore these themes by analyzing the characters and what's happening to them throughout the show. I'm also going to give just an eye of how production and producers would be manipulating what's going on behind the scenes. We've done this in Love is Blind as well. And just my knowledge in production, I was a social media producer on on a TV show. I also just have a lot of producer friends in Hollywood, so I understand how things are manipulated. And I love analyzing it because I think it really shows you that reality stars are just pawns to get the ratings, right? And I think they can really be exploited. And a lot of people could say they're doing it to themselves, like they put themselves in this situation. But that doesn't mean that they knew the extent as to which they were going to be exploited. Also, I just feel like a lot of reality stars end up becoming kind of the victims of a plot. And even they don't realize what they're doing to feed into this plot because they're being encouraged to do so. And it isn't until you get out of this culture that you see, like, this was a really dangerous, unhealthy environment for me. And like, was it actually worth it? And I know a lot of the women like to go on social media saying, of course it was worth it, because look at me now. I have millions of followers. I have a bunch of money. But a lot of their marriages are falling apart. A lot of their friendships are falling apart. And the whole reason that Taylor Frankie Paul says that she started this group, Mom Talk, was to have a supportive group of women. So I want you to keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, that the whole group of Mom Talk was to have a supportive group of women, especially moms, almost like the trad wife type of moms, mostly stay-at-home moms, but now they're building businesses and they're empowering each other. So their whole thing is we empower women to kind of take control of their own narratives, to have their own lives, to carve out their own businesses. Like, you don't have to be, just submissive in like a dangerous way to your husband. You can break out of that. So that was initially the whole goal. But this season we're seeing that, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of women, and a lot of them still hold their moral ground and stand up for each other and empower one another. But then there's others who have really taken this and gone way too extreme with the exploitation and seeing what money can do and seeing what they need to do to generate more revenue in this type of environment. So let's dive into breaking down the themes by looking at the characters and the situations they're being put in, and analyzing if this is really more harmful than good. And I welcome respectful conversations in my comments. And I want to hear from you guys, because there's elements of the show I still like. I still find it fun and kitschy, and it's just like fun to watch reality television. But there's also parts where I'm like, I really don't know if we should be promoting this. And it's nothing against the women. I have a lot of grace for the women. It's about the exploitation of their trauma. And if you like a good kind of spiritual deep dive, I'm going to include that at the end I have a minor in theology, and I kind of want to bring in some theology at the end of this video. But we're going to say that to the end because it's probably a very niche group of people who want to hear that feedback. Let's start with the main character, and that's Taylor Frankie Paul. She's the star. She's also the scapegoat in a lot of these situations, and she's the soul of the show. The thing about Taylor that everyone loves is she's flawed and she's messy and she doesn't try to hide it. And although she's incredibly beautiful, you understand why people like her so much, because she's kind of like the little instigator at times. Like, she knows when she's dropping a bomb and leaving it there and letting things explode. But it's kind of fun to watch because you see that she's self-aware when she causes drama. It's like a wink, wink, I'm about to blow this up. So it's very fun for an audience to watch. But unfortunately, her trauma obviously is being exploited on the show, because that's what gets the ratings, because the star needs to have a lot of trauma. So she's being very vulnerable throughout the show. And obviously, Taylor Frankie Paul's trauma and vulnerability is kind of like the guiding force for the whole show, because that's what you're following. She's the main plot line. So we're going to watch how she's exploited and manipulated throughout the whole show by her family, by probably producers, and by her group. And it's so unfortunate to see. And the one thing that was really fun to watch in season 1 was seeing how the girls would come together and be friends. And it was kind of like them against the world. And now it's every man for themselves. It truly is in season 2. And there's something very eerie about that, knowing that some of them are willing to just throw the others under the bus. So let's start with her family. Her mom has become a little star in and of itself, and she kind of gives more best friend energy than mom. That can be dangerous when you're involving money in a reality show, because her mom clearly got some work done. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to improve yourself, you want to get some procedures, whatever. A lot of people have their own opinions on that. I'm like, do whatever you want to do. I do think it's getting a little dangerous with things that Kris Jenner is doing. and the example that she's setting for women, but her mom definitely stepped it up this season and became more part of the plot line. And her mom invites Taylor's baby daddy, who she had a baby with and a relationship with, over for a family barbecue dinner. They have the entire family there, and they're like, why can't you guys work out your problems, right? Because it's a very toxic relationship that Taylor and Dakota have. That's on again, off again, like throwing each other under the bus, cheating on each other. And we just learn that Taylor's baby daddy, who she just had a child with, was cheating on her. And what was incredibly disturbing to me, and I think a lot of women that I'm reading online, is how this was spun to be put on Taylor, like it's Taylor's fault. And I'm noticing the more I do research, the more common this is in the LDS faith. It's to be incredibly submissive to your husband to the point where it's almost like your fault for things that happen in the relationship. And the family, no matter what, wants you to stay together. So instead of being like a one-on-one conversation, for instance, it's a family barbecue where they decide to gaslight Taylor this entire barbecue. And it felt so hard to watch because your parents are supposed to be that safe space for you. And they're supposed to want to protect their daughter, right? And what we see instead is Taylor's stepdad saying, well, who are you? Because he's coming over, you guys aren't together, and you sleep with him on day 3 of dating or whatever the timeline was. And he's like, who are you? And kind of points at her, is very condescending, triggers a lot of women because you see that not only is your own family not, kind of standing up for you, someone just cheated on you, and somehow you're being the one that's blamed for him cheating on you.
He goes, and Taylor, you're pretty much the only girl I'm seeing. You come over the next night, me, and then you go and you hang out with another girl, and then he comes the next night and me.
You're sitting there telling me that he came over and had sex with you? What does that say about you?
If that isn't emotional manipulation, I don't know what is. So she's in a very toxic, emotionally manipulative family environment.
And when you hear your parents say that, like, why were you expecting to be respected? It like hurts.
So you see throughout the show that there's not a lot of support for Taylor standing on her own and getting herself out of this toxic relationship with Dakota. It's more like being on Dakota's side. And I just don't like how her family seemed to gaslight her, except for her sister who was standing up for her. So you already have a disconnect with your family. So we're following that trauma. But then you have trauma of people in your own group that's supposed to support you. It's supposed to be a mom talk, like Us Against the World. Reminds me kind of the Spice Girls, right? Then we see that we learn that in this type of group where the girls have millions and millions of followers, their whole goal is to build up their business. They keep talking about mom talk like it's more of a business, honestly, than a friendship. But Taylor keeps saying that this wasn't all supposed to be business. This was supposed to be friendship. Like, at the core, this was supposed to be a friendship. And we come to learn, like many of these shows, that a lot of these relationships are kind of like fabricated. Like originally, they could have been a lot of people that were friends. But now, as time goes on, it's more of a business. And the villain, who has become the villain this season, her name is Demi, she makes this very clear, that this is a business that should be treated as such. And a lot of these girls are willing to just like throw each other under the bus in order to keep getting that paycheck, keep climbing the ladder, keep being the one that's getting the interviews. And Demi seems to be among this group. Now, we're going to put a pause on that for a second. So in this group, showing each other support is the goal, apparently. So the girls, it seems like, have made some sort of bond to support each other privately, but also publicly online. And who doesn't want your friends to do that, especially if you're in this influencer type of group, hyping each other up, being in each other's videos. When one of you gets a cool opportunity, hyping that up. So a big thing that happens is that Taylor goes to the CMAs. She's one of the hosts. She's definitely the leader of Mom Talk. I mean, she has the most followers by far than anyone else. And none of the girls support her publicly on her Instagram post. I will admit, I'm not someone who scrolls on Instagram. I will read people's stories, and that's becoming more of a habit these days. But I don't look at people's actual posts. Like, I'm not scrolling Instagram. I thought it was interesting, though, that none of the girls apparently commented on her post and showed public support. So now you're seeing a lack of support from the group, and this burst out into a fight where she retaliated and posted something online calling the girls out. And I do agree that if you're in a group that has events and you're supposed to be publicly supporting each other, you should publicly support each other. But you should also obviously tell each other, like, hey guys, can you go post this thing? Like, so there's already feelings and jealousy that's happening. And this is normal for a reality show, right? And we also follow Taylor's just feelings throughout the show, saying like she really just needs to dive deeper into therapy. She needs to rewire her brain. She talks about her convictions, how she doesn't feel worthy of love. And it's treated as content. Like this is the leading story throughout the show, is this toxic relationship with Dakota, her toxic relationship with a lot of the girls. And Dakota is emotionally detached, performative, quietly cruel. And her stepdad is next level condescending. He makes passive aggressive comments. He doesn't validate Taylor. He feels unsafe, like he's there to protect the narrative, not the person. And that's how a lot of them feel to me throughout the show. This isn't just toxic friendships. This is toxic family dynamics. And this is a case of generational pain being passed down and then filmed. We're seeing the behind the scenes of reality television and what this is really about when you start to see that it might have started as a friendship, but when a lot of money is on the line, when competition and jealousy is on the line, like all friendship aside, the gloves, as Demi would say, are coming out. And our villain of this season, her name's Demi. She's definitely the person who wants to take over Taylor's place in this mom talk group, right? And what I think was very eerie is that we would see the girls showing up almost as producers. Like they were the ones producing the scenarios, setting up different scenes that they knew were going to be toxic. So her and her best friend, Jessie, who owns the Jay-Z Styles hair business. It's like a huge hair empire. So they team up and they create these very emotionally manipulative situations. And I think this is where danger starts coming into play, when characters start becoming producers and they start taking on a mind of their own because they know, I have to play a key role in this whole narrative or I'm going to get cut. Like if I don't have an interesting enough storyline, I'm going to get cut. And that's what we see with these two girls. There's a relationship, Jen and Zach, who in season 1, they had a big fight because she went to a Chippendale's performance she didn't even know she was going to. So these girls say, we're just going to create a situation so they can experience exposure therapy. And this is very manipulative. And this is not healthy. Demi tries to say, come on, Zach, we believe in you. And they fly in a Chippendale's dancer and have some of the men take off their shirts and dance on Jen. And their whole goal, they say, is to see if Zach has really become a changed man. This whole situation to me was so eerie, and it really just shows you when you're in these like toxic environment girl groups, especially when they're faith-based, unfortunately, what I've seen and I've experienced it myself, a lot of times there's too much dynamic of like friendships and your significant other and what they have to say about your relationships. I'm sure this happens in a lot of groups, right? Of do they approve of this person? Let's put them into a scenario. And this is where to me it gets very toxic and very dangerous. We should take note of in reality television. Putting people in scenarios that can cause a lot of trauma and drama and potentially even destroy your marriage by taking on the therapist role, by taking on the producer showrunner role. And Jessie seems to do this kind of throughout, sticking people in situations she knows is going to cause chaos and is going to cause drama. And this is why you continue to go back and you watch the show because you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? She purposely invites people to the party that she knows are going to argue. But to what extent does this become, oh, this is just for drama, just for clicks? And to what extent does this become dangerous? I think we have to think about that. For instance, Demi at the party, someone kind of like poked her to get her out of the way. And she says, he laid his hands on me. And this really reminded me of the like lively Justin Baldoni case of her claiming that he was weird to her on set. And then we see the film footage and you're like, no, he wasn't. He wasn't weird to you. We see it in footage and we can see the video of this character named Chase kind of poke her. She goes, he laid his hands on me. She runs to her husband and says, this man laid his hands on me. And the husband obviously gets very enraged. His name's Brett. He's like 17 years older than Demi. And he runs out very enraged and it caused this trauma. Are you trying to get someone killed? Like if I told my husband someone put his hands on me, to me that means someone like hit me, slapped me, punched me, hurt me. And of course you're going to enrage a husband. So again, the levels that these, I'm just going to call them characters because the women know they've become characters and that they have to play some sort of character type in a show in order to move along the plot, right? This is already creating a very dangerous environment. You're enraging one couple who you already know has had these triggers in the past. You're putting them in an awkward situation, potentially dangerous situation for a man who gets easily enraged. Like, do you really want to play the therapist right now and offer exposure therapy? And then you're enraging your own husband to then react to something that you're saying is just not true. It's like a man putting his hands on you. If we were to look that up, it's not someone poking you or like lightly pushing you aside. That is very different than a man putting his hands on you. And I think that's why more and more people don't like that some women these days are taking a story and just running with a completely different narrative arc. It's like when people say, well, that's my truth. That might be your truth, but that's my truth. No, there's just one truth. Like, can we all just stop saying that's your truth? This is my truth. No, there's one truth, and that is what happens. There's different ways to perceive a situation. She could come out now and say, you know what? I perceived that in my head with all the buildup, like it was much bigger than it was, but I realized now it was just like a thing and I shouldn't have done that. But she's owning this like perception, which again, I think is really dangerous, because then when you come out and you continue to make accusations in other matters, which we've seen this character do, you don't end up believing her because you're like, well, you lied about this. Why wouldn't you lie about that? Which is, again, what we're seeing in the Blake Lively case. What we're seeing with Meghan Markle, if you lie about this, then how do we trust you on anything else, right? The other element that was really sad to see throughout was constantly turning on each other for that clout, for gaining notoriety, for becoming famous. And Demi is the character that definitely does this time and time again. Her friend Macy gets a book deal because Macy has gone through a lot. She's also building a business of baby mama. She gets a book deal, and you could tell these girls are just not supportive. Some of them are, that are the true friends, and then some of them aren't. And Demi, for instance, completely turns on Taylor. She also puts her other friend, Jessie, with the hair business down and says her business, don't even go to it. She's sending business elsewhere. And she was willing to throw her friend under the bus in order to get a higher contract and get her friend off the show. And it's just so sad to see. It feels like there is no room anymore in reality television for just like honest friendships. Like, why can't people just be like good people to each other? And the more you see, oh, this is getting the click, like this is going to keep me on the show. It's okay if I'm the villain, as long as I stay on the show. It's just ramping up emotional manipulation. And you're almost wondering as a viewer, like, how far are these girls willing to go in order to stay on a reality TV show? And I don't think there's anything redeeming about that quality. The one friendship I thought was compelling to watch because they stayed friends and they empowered each other were two girls, Macy and Michaela. These two girls showed us, you know, what reality television is all about, and showing us the moments where, yes, it could be about the drama and the chaotic moments, but also you need redemptive qualities in a TV show in order to keep audiences that are smart and want something in their lives that isn't just dramatic, but also has a positive arc. And these two characters actually really do have empowering stories. One of, you know, sexual abuse and overcoming that and having to go through, I believe it's lupus, don't quote me on that, but having to go through a chronic illness in those explorations. And we see even Demi having to go through, you know, in being infertile. But we constantly also see that these types of situations are being manipulated, and it's incredibly hard to stomach as a viewer. Another situation that was so produced and I think so exploitive was the girls did a pregnancy roulette. And the, you know, Demi character, although she is, you know, the villain this season, not supporting a lot of her qualities and tendencies. But this situation where you have a friend who's potentially infertile with her husband, and you say, let's all play pregnancy roulette. We're all going to take a pregnancy test. We're going to mix them up in the middle, and we'll see if anyone anonymously comes out pregnant. Knowing that a friend is infertile and her expressing she doesn't want to do this and continuing to go with that, I think, again, is not just drama for the camera, but it's exploiting trauma. And I think that's really highlighting a key element and a key danger in reality television right now is how far are characters, our producers, our networks willing to go to exploit trauma? We see this play out a lot with the couple, Zach and Jen. And Jen is in a tumultuous relationship with her husband, Zach. Zach ends up showing better qualities this season. But again, when someone has, anger and enraged issues, you don't want to trigger that person. So putting him in another exposure therapy situation was not a good idea. So once again, exploiting trauma. And Jen is another example of exploitation of trauma. And we see cameras continuing to follow her as she's saying, I'm really depressed. She cries, hysterically crying on camera that she's pregnant because now she's in a relationship with her husband that she doesn't know is toxic or not, whether she should stay with him. We see her bawling her eyes out that she's pregnant, a seemingly potentially beautiful moment, or maybe it's a hard moment because she's in that situation, but no, they had to film it. 100% that they wanted that on camera. And this just breaks my heart for this character because it's exploiting her trauma. She tells us that there are a number of times that she's had suicidal thoughts and she's bawling her eyes out. And my heart really goes out to her. And this is not at all putting the women down for their trauma. It's almost standing up for them because I really feel like they're being exploited. Whether they're monetizing it or not, yes, they're making money from it, but I almost think the mentality that they probably have being filmed almost is a victim mentality because now that they're in it, it's going to be very hard to get out of this situation. If you're making a lot of money and you continue ramping it up, I think their lives in the long run, their souls, their families, their dynamics, their friendships are going to continue to get destroyed because when you're on camera and when you're the star and when you aren't playing a character, it's much easier to have healthier relationships when it's separate than your own identity, right? In real life. But when your real life is the plot, in order to keep the plot going, you need more drama. And they're going to be encouraged to continue to create chaotic, more dramatic moments. And if they've already taken it this far, how far are all of them willing to go? And I am glad that Hulu, ended up saying, out of respect for this couple and trying to get better in therapy, we're going to turn the cameras off and we're not going to follow this storyline anymore because it's dangerous and it's traumatic. And we're seeing this girl cry. They're saying 90% of the time they're crying about this group. And yet the group, a lot of members of the group support her. But then there are still girls whose minds have been completely untethered because they're so into carrying out this narrative and carrying out their character's mission, which is to be the villain. This is what I'm convinced. This character, Demi, she says, I think it's very manipulative and not real and staged for her to send us all a video saying that she was crying on camera and that she's in a dark place. There's a huge disconnect of empathy throughout this show. And I think that's where the darkness and the dangers come in because you're like, where did this come from? How come you lack so much empathy? And I think even the girls are starting to feel it throughout the show. They're like, where is the empathy? Where is the support? Taylor Frankie Paul continues to be our hero throughout, our very messy hero. But I think you follow her because she's almost like the weird voice of reason, along with other characters like Macy. She's probably our true hero because she's the friend that you actually want to have your back. But Taylor Frankie Paul stands up for some of the women who aren't in the group, like Miranda and like Whitney. Some of these girls that were not in the group, she invites them back in. She says, we need to give everyone a second chance. But then she gets thrown under the bus by these women not supporting her in the long run. So it's just become a very dark and toxic show that I really was like, I don't know if this show is doing more harm in promoting these dangerous habits and these dangerous storylines, or if it's actually empowering women at the end of the day. And I think you see the character of Miranda saying that this was supposed to be about empowering women. And I don't think this show any longer is empowering women. And that's unfortunate. Sure, does it make good reality television? I guess it's a question of how do you find good reality television? Do you define it as drama and dramatic? Sure. But I'm someone who's always liked the show Love is Blind because I'm rooting for people to find their love story. I want a positive, redemptive arc. And when you have characters who continue to just be emotionally manipulative, throw each other under the bus, want more money, greed, you can't have an entire show turn into that? Because then it's almost like promoting those behaviors. And I think it's really, really dangerous. One character I also admired, her name was Michaela. She's the one who has a huge chronic illness she's been battling for years. And what I loved about her was she was really standing up for herself and saying, I'm not participating in this person's drama. I'm not going to be friends with them, and I'm protecting my peace. And I actually do not see that as mean girl behavior. I do see that as someone who's setting her boundaries, and she's really just standing her ground. And actually, she reminded me a lot of Blair Walter from Gossip Girl. I was like, she knows how to protect herself. And that's exactly how I hope all of these characters can continue to lean in more of protecting their peace and protecting themselves. I think that's a big question all of us can ask ourselves, even on my channel, as we built up our community, is how far are you willing to go to hit your next goal and to hit your next milestone? Are you willing to compromise your soul to get to what you want? And I think a question we all honestly need to ask ourselves is what am I willing and what am I not willing to do in order to succeed and to grow in this world? What am I willing to give up and what do I need to protect? And I want to encourage all these girls right now, you don't need to stay on this show. If this is destroying your lives, I know everyone loves it. Everyone loves reality television, but I also want to invite you to understand and take ownership of your own lives, because I really believe right now that you guys are puppets. You are puppets to producers who are going to continue to manipulate you. And I want to empower you to feel empowered. If the show is destroying your life and you can't protect your peace while you're in the show, you have blossomed and you can step out of the show and create your own beautiful life. And I think that's a big thing I've seen in my time in Hollywood. I understand that there's so much corruption, there's so much evil behind the scenes, and there's so much emotional manipulation, especially when it comes to reality television, that we really, I don't think, maybe that's my conclusion, maybe I'm figuring out my conclusion while I'm talking to you beekeepers, is I don't think we should continue to feed into like supporting this type of emotional manipulation. And maybe that means not watching shows like this. I don't know what that means. It's like I want to support women who are trying to help their families and have better lives, but I also don't want to promote emotional manipulation. I'd be curious how you guys feel about this too. There's so much more I could say about the show, and if you're interested, we could dive even deeper into the show and explore other themes. For a character like the character of Layla, for instance, who is feeling empowered throughout the show, but is still like being held back by her need to be accepted into this community, to be accepted into this business. I think you see that these characters are very silenced in a way. And I just really want to empower all these stars and our community to start standing up for themselves, start being able to call out injustice, and start protecting your peace. There's so many more themes that we could dive into in this show. If you guys really liked analyzing this type of show like this, let me know in the comments, please. I really welcome your feedback, because I want to hear what really inspires you to click on my videos, to click on this channel. And I think there's so much we can learn from a show. Even if you don't watch the show, I think there's so much you can learn from it. Overall, I think the show dresses itself up as empowerment, but underneath it all, it's women who are weaponizing each other's trauma for the clicks. I was asking myself, I'm like, well, what would Jesus think of this show? What would Jesus do in these situations? For those of you who are believers, I know a lot of these women are believers, and I was working with ChatGPT. I was sending ChatGPT all my notes. I'm like, what do you think Jesus would think about this situation? This is from ChatGPT, obviously AI, but I think it makes some really good points of ChatGPT says he'd sit with the women no one else would. Throughout scripture, Jesus was the one who sat with the bleeding woman, the adulterous woman, the shamed woman at the well, not to shame them, not to film them, but to restore them. Matthew 11:28 says, come to me all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Can you imagine that rest for someone like Jen, who's collapsing under the weight of postpartum depression while being filmed from 3 angles? Can you imagine that rest for Taylor, who says she doesn't feel like she deserves to eat first-class food and whose own mother sides with her ex? He'd call out spiritual manipulation. This is so interesting. Again, ChatGPT. Matthew 23:13 says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. And that's what this show feels like. people who are claiming spiritual authority, using shame, power, and silence to control others, people who are telling women to own their truth, but only when it's convenient for the whole group, people who are turning confession into content and redemption into storyline. ChatGPT says Jesus always saw past the label. Where others saw crazy, he saw crushed. Where others saw drama, he saw depth. He wouldn't dismiss Taylor as a hot mess. He'd see her as a daughter of God who's been betrayed, broken, and still somehow brave enough to keep showing up. Lastly, he'd remind us what real healing looks like. Healing doesn't happen on camera for likes. It happens in quiet spaces with safe people without manipulation, comparison, or votes. Healing looks like sitting with your grief, letting someone else cry without recording it, choosing not to clap back just to get the final word. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." What would Jesus think about this show? I don't think Jesus would cancel the show, but I think he would take the group, he'd walk into the group chat, clear the table, and say, this is not what real friendship looks like. This is not how we treat each other. If you're watching the show also feeling uncomfortable and you're wondering why, it's because your soul knows then none of this is what real healing looks like. This is what happens when pain becomes a business model. You know what I just realized? It reminds me of how all of these documentaries that we see on Netflix about how the parents are manipulating the children for the likes, for the clicks, for the social media things. It's like, but we're that audience. And we see now in those documentaries how corrupt all of that is. So now that we've seen the exposure, why would we continue to feed into like how badly we're encouraging others to create the drama in their own lives? Like, I would really love to do an interview with some of the girls. I don't know if they would be open to that, but yeah, I just feel like we're preying on the vulnerable right now. And it really does break my heart. One woman stood up in a very messy and chaotic way, but one woman stood there real and raw and refused to be anything but herself. And I think that's why people will continue to root for her. Out of all this mess and all this chaos, I did say there was one woman who continued to stand out to me. And although I really loved Macy and Michaela's storyline, I also really loved Taylor Frankie Paul. And what I really loved about her is that she continued to show up real, raw, and authentic. And you might not be a fan of her. You might not even know what I'm talking about throughout this video. And that's okay, because I hope you still had some really powerful and strong takeaways. What makes Taylor Frankie Paul so redemptive and such a messy heroine to cheer on is that she, out of a lot of them, I think, continues to exemplify behaviors that keep you rooting for her, like forgiveness and standing up for the vulnerable and the weak. And I think that's what makes her probably the most authentic character on the show. So if anyone is going to be the leader of Mom Talk, it's going to be her. And sometimes our leaders aren't the most polished and put together and articulate. But Taylor's story really reminds me of John 8:7. And it's a story where religious leaders bring a woman who's in adultery to Jesus, and they're trying to trap him into saying, you know, judge her. She's sinful. Like, she shouldn't get your graces. And John 8:7 says, when they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And all of us have bad parts about ourselves that we're like, oh, that was kind of like not my best quality. But if we can own it and continue to show up and do good for the world and be better people, then you're going to continue to get people who are rooting for you. And I think this is a really interesting, flawed character who's given this opportunity. Kind of shows us that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy in this world and to be worthy of a platform. So if you get anything out of this video, I hope it's that we're all flawed and that we do need to protect the people around us, whether they're getting into a situation where they're entering reality television or maybe just getting into a situation that's going to prey on their vulnerability. I think we have to be really cautious of situations like that. Let me know, guys, if you like this video. If you want to catch up on more of my pop culture deep dives, take a look at this playlist and stay tuned, because coming up, I'm going to be interviewing someone who has been covering the Baldoni Lively case who has some great insight. I also have a great storyline of how I'm connected to this person. I think you're going to really love watching that interview. Thank you so much for watching this far. I appreciate this. This is a different style of video. I want to know if you enjoyed it. Thank you so much, my beekeeper community. I will see you in the next one.
Show me life, show me love. Make